I'd like to introduce the session. Then we'll be going for a very brief introduction, and then I'll be introducing our very special guest. And just a short introduction. Then he'll be sharing much more with us. So today's focus is the title of today's fourth and final meetup is Back from the Future. This is part of a series, as Kaisa has mentioned. Most of you have been with us throughout this journey. We began with an introduction, trying to define the misunderstood, and the conversation happened between Kaisa and Lauren Vargas from One by One, who could not join us today, but she has been very active and and a pleasure to work with such a collaborator. Then the second meetup focused on the wider context, and that is when Lauren and our guest Ross Berry were in conversation about the wider context and how digital is informing the way museums and museum organigrams could develop, how we can become digital literate, and so on and so forth. The meetup before today was about shifting perspectives, and I was in conversation with Fabio Viola, a game designer who is very active in Italy, and we discussed the gaps in the museum ecosystem and how gamification can also help in developing digital experiences. And today, for our final meetup, we're hosting Risto Silvas, and the focus, our chosen title is Back from the Future. We shall try to answer a couple of questions. Thanks to Risto's input and experience, we shall try to explore how better or what type of futures can we aspire to with a better understanding of the digital, the type of organograms that museums need, the extent of information literacy. And I know that Risto will also be speaking about uncertainty, organizations and customers, and so on and so forth. Before I pass on the mic to Risto, I'd like to briefly introduce him. He is currently at the helm of the Information Networks program at Aalto University, a very interesting program which blends software, design, business, and social sciences to create multi-talented professionals. In other words, change agents for our society. Risto has a colorful history of developing design, business, technology, and society. He is a software engineer who did his master's on IPR, his doctorate on media metadata, his postdoc on photography. A very interesting person, Risto, and would really love to learn more about all your experience here. He has been the leader of a multidisciplinary research group, the head of UX and service design at Futuris, and he's one of the founding fathers of Lean service creation, methodology, and business. Risto, over to you.
Thanks very much. Thank you for the kind words. Very nice to see you all and hear where you're from. After over a year of this remote stuff, I do actually appreciate the opportunities of having people in all around the world talk with each other. I think it's just a very simple thing I enjoy quite a lot. And thanks to the organizers, especially Kaisa, for asking me to come and talk with you. And I'm gonna give in roughly 20-25 minutes. I'm going to tell you everything I know, and then we can discuss what does it mean and how to apply it and so forth. Let me set my clock so that I stay on 25 minutes and put on my screen. There we go. How does it look? Probably looks okay. So I noticed that I didn't have a title for this presentation until 15 minutes ago. I was like, whoa, my slides are missing a title. So this was my very quick solution to it, because this is pretty much when I typically talk to organizations, and I really try my best today to kind of tailor this to you, because you're museum people and your organizations are museums, and you have the cultural context and all of that. And the main point is this, that it's back to basics. When it comes to uncertainty, when it comes to digital, what I have in my career noticed is that things have gone so fast that often we as leaders and directors and people doing stuff forget the very simple basics. So that's why I call it back to basics. Few words about me, where I come from, so you kind of understand that who I am, and if I say something, then you can put it into context, literally. So I'm a professor of practice at the moment at Aalto University in Finland, and it's a multidisciplinary university. So there's design and arts and a lot of engineering, and but also business school and so forth and so forth. My own background is what Sandro already said, that I have I've been over a decade as a design consultant and head of design and doing management consultancy. So after I did my PhD and my academic credentials, I went for 10 years to work as a professional, as a consultant. And the good thing was that I saw a lot of projects, and I ended up actually doing a lot of, teaching and transformation, and found myself at the working with Finnish large corporations and designing their organizations in the face of digitalization and their digital strategies. So very, very similar stuff that all of you are probably thinking about, but from a business context, and designing services and designing products, and how do you build an organization that actually can continuously innovate and be creative. So that's my background. And here in the right-hand side, I have been publishing books, online courses, and all of that. So kind of in the middle of all this, I try to make everything available for free to everybody. That's why I'm in a university. So why am I here? And there was a little bit of a clue. I did my PhD on mobile phone metadata. So there in the upper right-hand corner, actually, is one of this was already back in 2004. So we were creating the very first mobile photo sharing applications with my colleagues. And so that's where I did my PhD. And then actually I ended up writing a book because I didn't find one. So for my postdoc, I ended up doing the book there on the left-hand corner. That, okay, could somebody please explain me the history of consumer photography, so that there's the technology, the culture of domestic photography and the business. How do they mix together? I didn't find the book, so David and myself, we wrote the book. So that was my postdoc project. And then I guess kind of the thing I'm most proud of is right there in the middle is I had the opportunity to do co-curate photography exhibition here at Helsinki Museum of Photography. This was 2014, and it was an interactive because I was working for a software company, so we brought all the technology. Then we had a researcher who was researching consumer photography, and then we had the museum people as well. So it was a very nice collaboration. How do you make an interactive exhibition on something very contemporary? So that's how I got involved with photography and the museums, and that was the kind of how I am here today. And lately, in the past years, I've been very lucky to work. I really like you museum people. I really do. And every time I get an opportunity to give a talk or do a workshop, or I'm very positive. You are nice people. You're extremely well educated and smart and all of that, just to put it bluntly. So I'm happy to be here. So lately I've been working with executive education here in Finland, and we have for 2 years run this business of culture program, where we take the business basics and all the kind of the business thinking, and then do an education program for cultural institution directors and leaders and so forth. Kaisa has been asking, I've been giving talks and involved also in the project that she has been involved, collecting social photography. I had the opportunity to do another museum exhibition. This is the Helsinki City Museum here. And actually, last year I brought the Espoo Theater into one of my courses, and we did a cooperation with them. So here and there, I've been working with cultural institutions. And like I said, it's great. But what am I, no, my point here, I actually added this slide while I was listening to your background. And like I said, I have a software engineering background. The world I come from is very digital business models. How do you innovate, create products, services, and so forth and so forth. And the big thing that is happening in large corporations and in the business world is that in the past 10 years, it has become obvious that digital is not a technology exercise. And I'm sure you all know this. But this digital and software and data that are coming as technologies and as professions into museum space as well, they're actually introducing a way of working, because what digital is and how it is used and kind of the things, it brings a certain culture with it. And that's the kind of culture, the working culture, the way of working that I'm going to be talking about today. And that's kind of why the reasons that looking digital as a technology thing is very limited. And would love to hear after my talk or your views on this. But before we go there, there's a question. How many of you know Jamie Oliver? You can raise your hand digitally or in the camera. Marta at least knows Jamie Oliver. Thank you, Victoria. Anybody a fan? Anybody a fan of Jamie Oliver? And why? Do you dare to tell? Marta,
Well,
why do you like Jamie?
Well, I don't like it really much. I have seen some programs about him cooking and so on, but he become very famous in Spain because he put chorizo in the paella. That this is a very Spanish well-known dish. And he put chorizo in the paella, and Spanish people never put chorizo in a paella. They put chorizo in a sandwich or in, but not in a paella. So it was like a scandal especially for people in Valencia, in the area that the paella is typical. So that's why he was become very famous in Spain.
Yeah, and thanks. I'm looking at the chat as well. Thanks, Diane. Creativity, and Jose talks about communication skills, and Kai's social engagement as well. Well, I like Jamie Oliver because I'm a father of 3 kids. So we're a family of 5 with my wife. And well, he's a friendly guy, so it's easy to like. But actually what his cooking and the cookbooks are very simple things. He goes back to basics, like I'm trying to do my best here today. So like this book, I have the picture over here. It's just 5 ingredients and you can make a decent meal out of it. So it's kind of, it doesn't try to be anything fancy in those cookbooks. It's just good quality stuff if you understand the basics. And that's really what I'm trying to tell you here today. I'm going to give you kind of the 3 basics of any design or innovation ever. So that's my introduction to this. So here's the world, as you all noticed. This is the world that you and I live in. And put yourself in your professional position. That, let's say, for example, that you need to design an exhibition. Let's go like that. So here on the left-hand side are goals. So these stars are your own museum's goals. These are your organization's goals. And let's draw a circle around them. And then you have customers, you have the audiences, you have the people who are coming to the exhibition, and they have their own needs and goals. So let's draw a circle around them. And now the exhibition, let's call it a solution that you're doing, or designing, or building, whatever you call it, probably should be there in the middle. It should address some of the goals of your organization, and it should address some of the goals of the customers, shouldn't it? That's it. Those are the 3 basics. I'm done. Let's chew on them a little bit. So, oops, need to click on that. We have all been here, either as consumers or maybe, I don't know about your museums and the projects you work with. If we do something, let's say an exhibition, or it could be a marketing campaign, that just addresses our own internal goals, of course, the customer doesn't care. And this is, we've all been here. We have been getting products and we don't understand why anybody did this. Well, it's probably for all the internal goals. And we can go just totally the out of line on the other way as well. We can just go and do what our audiences really, really want. But if they're not taking our museum anywhere, if they're not if we're not following our strategies and mission, there's no value for us. We're just doing what the audience wants. So obviously the answer is somewhere here in the middle. So when we are in the middle of this Venn diagram, we get these very fashionable words that we are customer-centric and we generate value. And value in this sense means value for the organization. So for example, so here's the exhibition I did for the Helsinki City Museum. It was a time machine. The idea was that with virtual reality and projections, people could, they could travel in time to historical Helsinki. Now let's put it into the Venn diagram. So what did the museum want? So their primary goal for this exhibition was to change the concept of a city museum. They wanted to, not just for the audiences, but for themselves internally. That a museum is something people will walk into and it can engage, and it has VR goggles and all of that stuff. So, and it's a time machine, a playful thing and so forth. But for the audiences, the goal, they didn't that much care about the city museum as such, but of course the audiences, they want to be immersed, they want to be entertained, they want to try things out, new technology. And yes, they actually want to have a connection with Helsinki, the audiences that come to the Helsinki City Museum. And in the middle, those were pretty much the principles when we started the design of doing the exhibition. Another example, the snapshot we did a few years ago. So here, the goal of the photography museum was to make the museum interesting and relevant for teenagers and young adults. I'm sure you can resonate with this objective. But of course, for the audiences, again, they don't care for what is the goal of the museum as such. But because this was about domestic photography and snapshot photography, then kind of when we did interviews before the exhibition and try to understand their interest, it was more or less the thing I have over there. How is this photography habit, taking pictures, sending them, having different social media, how is this, am I part of a bigger phenomenon? And that's what we try to do with the exhibition as well. So that was the basics of it. And again, it's a simple Venn diagram. And I often feel kind of silly going over and over these three basic things. But somehow, either people tend to forget these. People tend to forget these basics, that whether you're doing a social media campaign, a museum exhibition, or you're doing a bicycle service or whatever, you always have these components. You need to bridge together your own goals and the customer's goals. Because now if we look at what kind of goals are these, what are these basic things? And if you think about your organization's goals at the moment, now these are the goals that exist even if you have 0 customers. These are your organization's internal goals. And one of the points I'm making here is that we should definitely distinguish these two. We should not mix them with each other. And these are the goals and priorities we have. These are the impacts we desire as a museum. This is pretty much should resonate with your societal mission. Why does your museum exist? What's its purpose in the long run? And then again, these goals, and they need to be separate because you need to step outside of your organization, literally. You need to see the world from the audience's perspective. And that's why it's so super important to talk them separately. So these goals exist even if your organization disappears. These are the needs and desires and problems that people have, and they're not dependent on your organizations. And you're just starting, clarifying these. It's that who are the actual customers? Who are your audiences? What does each different group desire and want? And who do they want to become? Why do they go to your museum? As a teenager, as a father, as a business professional, why do they visit your museum? Who do they want to become in that role? And how can you help in that? So for example, when we did the snapshot exhibition, it turned out that the young people kind of felt that bringing their friends to a museum and then go for drinks afterwards has certain kind of intellectual capital. They go like, okay, yeah, Kaisa, yeah, she's kind of like the, cultural person of our group, and that was social capital for them. And then, of course, when we talk about the solution, if it's an exhibition, a campaign, a product, these only should exist when you bring these two together. And like I said here, you can pretty much apply this simple thing for anything that you're building or designing or whatever verb you want to use. And the good news is this. At least in the world where I come from, there are many tools just to help in clarifying this. And I'm not saying that this Venn diagram I have here is something I have come up with, but this is pretty much the thinking behind many of those popular tools that are used in the business world to build better products, to build better services, and so forth and so forth. So for example, the business model canvas there in the left-hand side. So to put it simply, the lesson learned is that at the end of the day, when we're doing things, it's about combining our own goals with the customer goals and being strategic about it. Now, it's perhaps worth pointing out that I'm sure that when you listen to this, you go like, yeah, that's obvious. I know about this, you know, and yeah, it's nice simplification, Risto, but what's the new thing about it? But I'm sure you have also faced a situation that do the other people in your organization understand it in the same way? If there are people working under you, is it very clear for them what are the goals? Is it clear for them who are the customers and what are their things? So it's not just about you as leaders and directors and experts, but it's also as an organization, how clear is this simplification for everybody? The point being that if these simple things are not obvious to everybody, how on earth can you run as an organization with autonomous and independent teams and experts doing their best? So one of the questions to you is that, like I said, so the other bubble is all about having clear objectives. What's our objective for the first half of 21? What is our annual objective this year? What's the desired impact? Let's build this exhibition. So what's the actual impact we want to generate by this exhibition? And what's the broader mission of our museum? Why do we exist? And if you have the answers, does everybody understand the same way? They don't have to be precisely the same answers, but enough so you can align people to work together, make independent decisions if these things are clear. And the same goes for the customers. And I put the word continuous accumulation here, meaning that you don't do customer studies every time you start an exhibition, but how do you keep on building on top of it? How do you keep on accumulating the customer understanding? How do we group them? How did we group our customers in this exhibition? But how do we group them in general? And for this exhibition, it made actually sense to group them in a different way. And how does that kind of knowledge and know-how go over and over, year after year? And that's what I call a strategic customer knowledge. So basic questions that probably some of your customers are more valuable than others, either money-wise, or maybe for some other reason. Maybe they bring other people in. Maybe they're your business partners, not customers as such, but partners, companies or whoever you do cooperate with. And now one final thing, then I'm done and we can start more discussing more about Jamie Oliver or something else. So I'm going to now introduce a third circle into this picture. So be prepared. There's going to be 150% more information soon. So here's the thing. Typically we go, that's great. We have the organization goals. Let's clarify them, and the customer goals. Let's clarify them. And let's choose from those goals which ones we're going to address with this super awesome exhibition. Let's go. And typically the attitude and the response is something like this. Yeah, that's what we need. That's what the audiences need. Can we have one, please? Let's go and do it. Amazing, cool. Yeah, we already have many ideas of how to do this. So the third circle is what is called in corporate jargon, capabilities. So in English, it just means, what can we do? What can we actually do? What are we capable of? And the point of introducing this third circle is that it even gives you more clarification of what you should be doing. So at the end of the day, these three circles are a really good tool also for prioritization. What should we be doing now? What should we be doing this month, this week? So let's go over the simple overlaps. So it means that when we introduce the third circle, the sweet spot in the middle is all about the solution we have capabilities for, the solution we can actually build now. Because over here is, these are the goals, these are the parts of the solution that we really would like to have, but for one reason or another, we just cannot do it at the moment. Maybe we don't have anybody who can do that, or maybe there's just too much. We need to scope down the whole project. And this introduces the prioritization. So let's say that out of all those goals, those stars, we had picked those 5. But now we get another tool to prioritize and say that those 2 are actually more important than those 3, because it looks that at the moment we're not capable of doing an exhibition that would address all of these 5. And just as an exercise, we can start spotting goals over there on the right-hand side. So if we have a goal over there, the audience would love to achieve that goal. We can do it, but it doesn't make any sense for us. It's not taking our organization further. Then on the left-hand side, yeah, this goal is really important for us. We need to get it. And we can actually do something about it that our customers wouldn't care about it at all. And then, of course, we have goals like this, again, in the left-hand side. Yeah, we really want this, but our audience doesn't. And actually, we can't do it at the moment. And the same on the right-hand side. And then my favorite as an engineer is this golden star there in the bottom is that, we don't need it, the customers don't need it, but we can do it. Always a nice trap. Let's just do stuff because we can, but we're not really sure anybody really needs it. So here's the point, like I said before, this is just a simple, just imagine yourself drawing, maybe first for yourself, but then within your team, with your colleagues, drawing these circles and having a discussion, facilitating a discussion that, okay, what are our goals? And how do we manage them? This is like the first step of managing all the goals, all the objectives. I'm sure you have more goals and objectives than you can actually do. So you need to manage them and prioritize them. But also the capability circles brings you help, perhaps understanding your recruitment. What kind of people we need? Who should we recruit? But also maybe technologies, what kind of technology we might need? And how do we bring up our capabilities from that side? And then the third one in the long run, how do you build your competencies and capabilities? If these are the goals for both sides, how do we get from those 2 stars into the 5 stars over there? I'm going to have a sip of water and then I have my final summary. Here we go. I'm having questions for you. Future-proof organization, something that all of here are thinking about. So the kind of the thing to think about, how do you build a future-proof organization? And my take on it, in my experience in coaching many companies and also working with cultural institutions, that the future-proof comes from relying on experts and teams doing the decisions as they progress. So in another way, just like that agility dog over there, you don't need to design everything perfect before you start, but you actually rely on people making the right decisions as they go. But for an organization to be able to do this, you need the following. You need to have the goals and objectives and mission shared and understandable. You need to have a good understanding who are the customers and how they see the world. And then thirdly, how do you, what kind of routines and practices as a workplace you have to continuously, clarify these goals and go further. And then one word about the whole digital thing. like in my simple presentation over here, there's no difference whether you're digital or physical or both. And at least this is my perspective. My whole career working in the middle of digital and physical and all of that, it doesn't really matter. There are goals, and all of them at the end of the day, they're organizations and they're individual people, and they have the goals. What digital brings in is certain capabilities. So you can, for example, you can have a discussion with many more people than you could before. You can, you can market different channels and you can reach larger audiences. So those are capabilities that digital brings. But digital as such shouldn't be the goals of the organization. But the needs of the customers are not digital as such. And sometimes I get the feeling in the past 10 years that, focusing on digital too much, you lose focus on the basics. You lose focus on really what do all the stakeholders want, especially yourself as an organization. What's the vision? What's the mission? What's the strategy? Last two questions, or actually one question: how to adapt all of this in your own organization? And I guess there are two questions to think about. Can people make good decisions? So if we believe that a future-proof organization is based on the fact that smart, talented individuals make good decisions themselves, it's not a top-down organization. So can they make the good decisions? Are the goals understandable? Is customer knowledge shared? Does everybody know the limits of the capabilities and how are you expanding them? But also, will people make those good decisions? Even if they can make the decisions, will they make it? And this is another way of saying, what kind of a company culture you have, what kind of organization culture you have. Do you encourage people to experiment? Do you encourage people to make those decisions, to take risks? Well, how do you deal with failures? How do you deal with learning? Because if you encourage people to take risks, some of them are not going to succeed. That's obvious. You can't have both. So how do you deal with that? How do you experiment in that sense? And yeah, I leave it at that. Close to 25 minutes.
Thank you, Risto. Oh, wow. Lots of things to think about. Kaisa, would you like to go first? I think we can go for a quick Q&A with Risto, me and yourself, and then we'll open up the discussion. There are already some questions. I think Jose Antonio has already shared his.
Well, to start with, I feel like I don't have any questions. It's all clear. No, but it's very interesting because some of the guests we've had earlier have pointed out how this digital transformation, as we still call it, is so unique for each organization. And I guess in a way it is, because each organization looks different, but you make it sound like, no, there is one solution for all of us. Which is good.
No. Yeah, the solution, I mean, it's, how should I put it? Each organization is unique because the goals are unique, the mission is unique, the strategy is unique. But the kind of, how should I say, the meta level, the pain that digital transformation is bringing is nowhere unique. No, you can take practically any organization and you can feel at home. They're like, you have the same problems, interesting. And what are you, 10,000 people, a commercial organization? Yeah, funny. We're only 50 people and we're a cultural institution.
It's really, really good to be reminded that we aren't in a bubble as museums, but that we are actually facing the same issues as all businesses, really. I have one question, though, about performing user research, because I think many smaller organizations have challenges in doing this. We might do something for larger exhibitions, etc., but in reality, we would need to keep this knowledge up to date all the time and learn how to explore and get to know new audiences also, because we want to reach most of us reach a loyal museum audience, which is very, a narrow group of people, but we would like to reach everyone, would like to reach new audiences. Do you have any tips on how to build that knowledge capabilities into the organization without just paying lots of money to a company to do it for us?
Maybe this is a tip. Often I think that people think that somehow user research is a heavy thing. It is something that you need to recruit people to do, or buy it from an expert. But yes, you can do that. You can do a very heavy user research. But I think just thinking about lowering the threshold is that, for example, for the snapshot exhibition, we interviewed 10 people. I mean, that's not a lot, but also 10 people doing open-ended interviews, listening to them, kind of strategically picking who are the 10 people we interview. We intentionally took, different age groups and different interests, and just listening to them, just from the mouth to the ear, and understand, trying to understand their worldview just expands our own vision. And interviewing 10 people is not a huge project. So really trying, and every time you meet people, every time people come to your museum and you happen to be there, start chatting with them, listening to them, and trying to understand, engage them. You probably run workshops for different people, age groups, and school groups, and be there. Keep your ears open, eyes open, and be wary of buying 30,000 euro user research, because then the expertise is there in the people who did it and not in yourself. So try to find ways of doing it in a very light way and continuously.
Risto, it's the 16th of June, and today you gave us a template for the future. No, we can use this framework to do what? And that's my first question. And I mean, what better futures can we aspire with this framework? What is achievable with this? Can we aspire for a level of transformation that is sustainable? Because, as you mentioned, audiences change. There's nothing fixed in stone. Everything is in transformation. What is the sustainability of this model? Is it something that needs to be constant? Is it something that needs to be kept in check? I mean, how can we use this for a better future?
That's a good question. I think once you start thinking about these things, whether you use my simple model or just, asking yourself questions about your organization, you start recognizing that you have short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. And then you start discussing these with your colleagues, but also discussing it with them, in places like this, discussing with peers. This is what this group is all about. And then you start noticing what are the things about your museum that will not go away in the next 20 years or 30 years. Isn't that the reason of your existence? That many museums are there, have a societal role, and in a way, some of that never changes. And then you have the medium-term goals in the next, let's say, 5 years. What do we need to do to, keep our societal role, but also to keep the business running? I mean, even if you're not the most power-hungry capitalistic museum, you have costs that need to be covered. Everybody knows this. So that's okay, then you take a business angle in the midterm. And then, of course, we all have short-term things. And, after the pandemic and all the, your doors have been closed, I think you all know quite well, much better than I do, what are your short-term things that you need to do when it comes to your business, when it comes to audiences and exhibitions and things that you're going to do. So after time, you start seeing which ones are the stable ones and which ones are the ones that keep constantly moving.
Okay. And my second question is about organograms. Thank you for stating that you like us. That's great. Thanks. And you've worked with a lot of organizations, not just museums, and you've been probably looking at different organograms. I mean, what type of organograms should we aspire to for that circle? What type of circle needs to overlap with the customer?
I'll try to give a short answer, not another lecture. I think one of the points I'm doing that if I had another half hour with you, I would probably start introducing the whole idea that how do you take those circles, and you need to kind of what you asked Sandro before. It's a constant discussion within the organization, because things live, things happen, and part of if you think, like I said, it's like a washing machine where you see which ones are the solid goals and which ones keep changing. The only way to know this is to have kind of a routines that maybe every month you look at your midterm goals or short-term goals, and once in a year you go over and discuss the long-term goals. And the kind of the things that you start drawing, you draw them together with the organization. So, but of course, you know what curating is all about, your museum. So it's kind of a curation exercise that you have these people working in the organization, you have the audiences, and how do you kind of curate that knowledge and keep it going and keep it alive and get new input, and how do you contextualize it's different now than it was 2 years ago and all of that. So I'm not sure if this answers your question, but that's the next thing, is what are your routines and practices as a leader or an organization to keep this alive, keep talking. Maybe it's just drawing those circles every month, every 6 months.
But do you see that there are some missing bolts and nuts? Working with other with different industries, with other sectors, how do you see museums perform? Is there something that's still missing? Is it just a question of legacy or culture, the way we do things? I mean, do you have some insight for us there?
Well, I guess if now I'm talking, the thing I learned with the Museum of Photography here in Helsinki and the projects we did together was that once everybody was clear that this is the social role of the museum, and these are the kind of themes that are relevant for the audiences, then you start looking at partners, whether they're commercial partners or non-profit organizations or a university, and which ones have the same goals or similar goals, especially if you think about audiences. So for example, let's take a commercial brand. Now let's say that the Museum of Photography wants to, be relevant for young adults in this context of, culture and pictures and photography. So what are the brands that are in that same goal space? So once you start clarifying the goals, you can start communicating them much more clearly to the partners. And then you find that, okay, we actually share these goals. Let's work together.
Great. I've asked my set of questions. I have more, but I don't want to take time from the community, away from the community. Jose Antonio, would you like to share your questions? I saw 2 questions.
Yeah,
in the chat.
Here in the chat are a couple of questions. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Sandro. My question is, what can we do when we see that the goals of the organizations are so far away and so disconnected from the goals of the audience? I remember the presentation of Fabio, and he told very interesting things related with how fast are the audience needs evolving, comparing with the elephants and the rhythm some organizations, like for example museums. So it's a very different speed, but also a question of different needs, different visions. Fabio mentioned, for example, the question of we are competing very hardly to get the time, to attract the time, not the money of the audience. And there is an incredible competition from video games or digital platforms, so cinema platforms that are competing with museums. This is today's reality. So how can we manage this when it's like a sideral distance sometimes between the museum's goals and the users' goals and expectancies? And relate with this the second question. I know that some very big museums and very prestigious museums are moving fast because they are trying to face this big distance, and one strategic tool is the participatory approach, is listen actively these needs and expectancies and commitments and skills from the audience to start to rebuild themselves from this point. They need a fixed point, a safe point to start all the process. And this is something that is happening in Tate Modern, is in Metropolitan Art Museums and another big ones. So my question is, do you think that to face this this change, this big challenge, the active listening from the museum to restart the identity is a good start point?
I'll quickly answer the second question. Yes. And then I go back to the first question. Of course, yeah, that was a really good point. At kind of that you are competing against Netflix and video games and you know, even what's even worse competition, a glass of wine with your friend. Hey, Jose, should we go to a museum or share a glass of wine? Hey, let's share a glass of wine at your house. That's a tough competition. But my point being that if you go behind the Netflix, video games, and the glass of wine with a friend, you are addressing the exactly same need of the customer. So having a glass of wine with a friend is our need to be in connection with our friends, our need to socialize, our need to forget our daily jobs. The same goes with the video games, doesn't it? The same goes with Netflix, doesn't it? The problem isn't that the goals aren't the same. The problem is that the competition is extremely tough. So you're addressing exactly the same goals and the needs of the customers, but the competition is almost unfair. So if you look at businesses, what they're doing, and like you said, Jose, they're competing for our attention. It's not the money as such, it's our attention, because that's often much more valuable. And that's, of course, if you think about what museums have been doing, it's one thing that they have made mobile phone apps. So, okay, if we're competing with everything I have on this screen, you know, if that's your competition, then one solution is try to be one of those icons on people's screens. But yeah, that's the world we live in. And then, of course, the other that I learned working with museums, that you do have some superpowers that commercial brands don't have. First of all, you're not commercial. And there are a lot of people who appreciate that and they value that. And especially now we live in a world where people are becoming more conscious of societal values, more conscious of things that you are experts of. At least the museums I work with, or theaters or other cultural institutions are the experts of addressing kind of those very deep needs and emotions, and especially when it comes to values, what people have. And then the non-commercial stuff, I think, is you could use the word trust here. And this goes to the photography museum, because when we started looking at digital photographs, people didn't trust commercial entities to, for example, store their photographs, but they would definitely trust the Museum of Photography because it's a non-profit, third sector organization. Again, I'm not saying things are easy, but maybe those goals, I'm hoping that clarifying the goals, understanding the customer goals, also on a deeper level, maybe start showing some opportunities. And I'm sure you have kind of found some connections here or there, because you have been dealing with this issue for at least a decade, haven't you?
Concha, would you like to share your thoughts? I've seen a most interesting comment of yours in the chat. We cannot hear you. You would need to unmute, Concha. Okay. Shall I read it from the chat? Okay. The comment that Concha has shared is, yes, it's a comment actually. I think that the methodology for digital transformation or digital strategy is quite shareable for many or most organizations, but the strategy itself will be different because the goals, audiences, content, etc., are unique for each museum. I mean, I think this is in line with what you were saying, Risto.
Precisely. That's a well written. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in a way, to a certain extent, there's always a question of a balance between getting the expertise that you need and fostering a culture of change from within. It's this relationship, perhaps this dialectic between within and outside, which you're talking about. Is that a good synthesis of the synthesis that you actually proposed?
Yeah, and I think Jose Antonio, you put it nicely when you said about the big museums that they're looking at things like participatory design, and they're, at least I understood from you that you know they are actively doing processes and bringing them kind of as a continuous way of working, not just a hey, let's be participatory for this month, and in July we're not participatory anymore. But you know the difference between doing it once or building it into the whole culture of the organization. But every time we meet people, you know, people come to the museum, we go like, hey, and you know, ask them questions and, you know, make it a lifestyle of listening who people are, why did they come from? And of course, I'm not saying that going deep into the, you know, our basic needs for meeting friends and all of that is easy, but you know, you should constantly have a conversation with people. You always get something.
Sandro, can I jump in with a question?
Of course, please.
And going back to organizational issues, many museums are kind of still quite traditional and siloed organizations. I mean, many are, of course, aware that we need to work differently, but what would you say is the first steps or most important steps to become more agile and lean and work in the ways that you suggest?
The answer is simple. It's just start with something small. Start with a project. Start with an exhibition. I mean, if exhibitions are a big thing in your museum, then start with a workshop. Or you know, if you have that one, you know, here's the main exhibition space, but then you have this other smaller thing. You know, start with the smaller thing, and you know, experiment. And the point being, guys, what you're also, you know, asking and talking about. There's a difference between experimenting with the content of the exhibition. And what I'm talking about, of course, is experimenting the way in which the exhibition was done. So that's my point when I said that digital brings a way of working. And again, I'm pretty confident that this is a good way of change, because that's how the business world has been doing in the past 10 years. They start with spearhead projects, and then the next question is, how do you expand from we did that project, so the next one is a bit bigger, and how do we expand that to the whole company culture? So, there's a comment here by Victoria.
Yes, yeah. Would you like to share it online, Victoria?
Yes, sure. I was just this is just one of the struggles that we have in Hungary when it comes to digital transformation, that it's of course very simplifying to think about digital as simply technology, as you pointed out, Risto, in one of your first slides. And somehow it's just very difficult to go back to basics, as you said, that the digital is about us. It's about how we tell stories, and the customers are humans too, and we are humans too. And somehow there's this strange gap between us that we don't understand, that what they need is basically something that we can give to them, and it's so difficult. I don't know, I just can't really make them, you know, how can we open their minds to make digital somehow more approachable? Because many times okay, sorry, I'm just rambling, that sometimes I think that they have an aversion to digital because they think that this is not human enough for a museum. On the other hand, we are not human enough in the first place. So I'm kind of struggling in the museum. first we have a struggle with the digital, and then we have a struggle with understanding the customer needs. So I think we have a lot of struggle. That's all I'm saying.
Mm.
Because Netflix is basically about being with listening to stories, getting connected to our universal humanity. Going out with our friends is about connection. So why can't we give something similar in the museums, be it with or without digital technology? It's just somehow it's difficult to get it through the minds of people in museums, in Hungary at least, because we are more conservative part of the museum world.
Well,
And I
that's
think I would
interesting.
add, it's actually very difficult to get through to the audiences as well. Like I said, the competition is tough, make no mistake. I mean, look at the revenues of Netflix. You know, they're probably bigger than your museums. So it's a tough competition for people's attention. But I mean, there's no silver bullet or easy solution. The thing is to experiment, to go where the audiences are. And if they're spending time on their mobile phone, then you need to think that what's our presence. If they're spending time on social media, so what's our presence there? And you need to have the capabilities and knowledge that how does social media marketing work? And then what's your unique thing? So it does require a lot of understanding as well as experimentation. You probably need to hire, and I'm sure a lot of museums, you have hired new communications people.
Yeah.
That are more savvy on social media, on gathering data, making database decisions about who are your audiences and so forth.
Although, to be honest, I have to say that, you know, they are a bit suspicious with outside people. I mean, somehow I think that it's a problem. I don't know if the other museum people have the same problem, but I think that museums somehow need to get over themselves. They take their relevance for granted, and they just somehow can't face the reality of, you know, that there are things that we have to keep up with. There are communication and UX and whatnot experts who know these things better. I think we just have an ego problem. I don't know if it's a Hungarian specialty, but we do have an ego problem.
I think we can all agree on that.
Yes, we can all agree on that. But I mean, Victoria's comments made me think of one other question, and this is for you, Risto. Do you see these problems in other sectors? Do you see these challenges in other sectors, or is it just the museum people who are sensitive or who need to engage with these type of struggles? Is it because the museum, even though you like us, even though we might be a little bit more conservative than the rest of the world, how unique are these characters? When, I mean, from your experience working with other industries, with other sectors, with other companies, agencies?
I think museums are unique, but not unique in what you say that you are conservative. We have a lot of very similar organizations. I work for a university, and some of you do as well. I mean, look at that organization. And just as an example, the university I work for it's pretty much number one in Finland in many areas when it comes to teaching and research, which means there's no healthy competition. There's no drive there's no healthy push to innovate, to be creative, to change. And then it goes to, I would like to understand better for the museums that you say are too conservative, is that are they in a similar situation that maybe the funding is guaranteed, or maybe, there's no competition. This is the only number one, I don't know, cultural history museum in this country. So we know that leads to human behavior of stagnation and being conservative and kind of shielding yourself for change. So that's definitely coming. And on the other end, we have a lot of businesses that are the reason why the world I come from in the past 10, or you could say 20 years, is that because the good thing about being a business is that you quickly see the numbers and the money going away. So you'd have this internal push to innovate. But then if we look at business history, it's full of companies like Kodak that didn't have really healthy competition. It didn't innovate. And where are they now? They are practically gone after being a monopoly on the planet. So I would throw it back to you, and you don't have to answer, but thinking about, what are the drivers and incentives for your museums to innovate? At the end of the day, you might have individual people. It sounds like, Victoria, you're a person who has a drive to go forward and innovate, but at the end of the day, if you're the only one, it's like, can't do much.
Can I just go back to, I think, Jose, your questions about goals are really interesting. And of course, it sounds easy to identify what goals we have, but at the same time, museums are at a position where we are really rethinking our value. And I know from a regional museum perspective in Sweden, or in all of Sweden, we have lots of expectations from our founders to solve all the problems in society. We should make sure that people are healthy and that they are entertained and that we are a teaching institution. And that's why I think also many museums are, yes, we have goals, but they're kind of all over the place. It would be easier to sell cars. So in that sense, I think museums are different. What do you say, Jose?
Yeah, I'm totally agree, and this is something that I want to connect with your comment with Risto, and something that Fabio mentioned in the previous presentation. He gave an interesting idea about to reshape and change the organigram of the museums, not copying, but following in some way, for example, the companies, the video games companies that are focused completely on the experience of the users. So why not start to think on this way, and to start to organize all the inner work in the museums, thinking at the end on the experience of the audience, of the users, in different ways, from asking them about what they want to know, what they need to know, from communication, from digital techniques, from narratives, from a storytelling strategy, evaluation, but all at the end focusing on the experience of the user, the experience of the audience. And this is something that the video games company is doing yet, but the question is not so easy. We are not video games company, but at the same time, we need to focus much more on the user approach and the user perspective. The challenge is how to achieve this, maintaining our identity as a museum, and not being like a video game company or a TV studio or whatever, or a Disney park. That's the balance, and it's not, we don't have a single answer, but at the same time, we need to think in this very serious, very urgent challenge, and this is something that outside the museums are facing and solving successfully, even gaining money for this. So this is something to keep in mind, I think.
Indeed, yes. In fact, yeah, Risto, please.
I just remembered kind of I should have had, maybe I can send you afterwards some links as well. But like I said, pretty much everything I've done and know I've tried to share for free. So, and the lean service creation methodology was, the whole point of it is to share. And I think a lot of museums have taken, especially museums, but also businesses have taken it into use. So I put now chat is, for example, my whole, it's a large course, but the whole course is online. I mean, and I can send you afterwards, and Sandro, you can help distribute the links to all the materials. So kind of taking Jose's point that you should be like game companies, or you should be like businesses, like well, all the methods, all the ways of working are freely, just go, and it's not impossible. Just, of course, you don't become game companies, but pick the stuff that is interesting. Pick the tools for building user experiences. They're all available. They're out there, and anybody can learn them. And then, they're not rocket science, but it doesn't solve the problem that you need a little bit of time and resources and capabilities.
There's another comment by Giulietta. Would you like to share it live, Giulietta?
These are just simple reactions to the conversation. Very interesting conversation. There's so many points of view and different optics and experiences to look at the conversation from. I'm just trying to contribute what I have learned from talking to people, and being myself from a rural community in northern Argentina, who didn't have access to a museum until I was 16 and went to the big city, to the university. I think technology is opening the minds of a lot of people and giving them access to a lot of things that they didn't have before. And there are experiences also that try to meet these needs and expectations midway, like the Museum of Folklore and Ethnography in La Paz, Bolivia. They have these buses, and they travel around the country in the rural areas, bringing material to the rural communities. So there are different ways to do it. I think technology is here to stay. It's not going to replace the museum experience, the personal experience, the human contact, but it's here, and it's good that we can take advantage of it, right?
Indeed, and in fact, Victoria was reacting to you in the chat, and something that struck me is what she wrote, that she's rooting for a digital with a human touch. And this reminds me very much of a conversation I took part in a few weeks ago as part of a consultation group. And one of the experts who joined the discussion talked about the fact that what really matters now and in the future is interaction. If we take digital through the lens of interaction, of connections, of conversations, because at the end of the day, even if it is just a digital handshake, a virtual handshake, it's still a handshake, but it's conversations that need to be taken into account here. I don't know, Victoria, if you'd like to react to this, or if there's something that you would like to add. I really liked your comment. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. No, that was all. I was just commenting that I'm not against digital at all. It's just that we have to do it, yes, intellectually and emotionally and very consciously to make it good and effective. And by the way, Risto put the online handbook for change in the comments, and I can only recommend the course that he was doing with his colleague Yari at the university. So it wasn't designed for museum people, but it was so beneficial. So I can only recommend it for all the other museum professionals out here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One thing, if I can throw one more thing, is the thing that I do with museums, and like I said, the theater over here, is I'm encouraging, and you probably do, collaborate with the universities and with the students, and not the students that are close to museums. I mean, go students to a business school who are experts on building brands, and just let them go loose with your brand, because they would understand the thing that your brand has. Because like it came to my mind when you said that in Bolivia, there's the bus that goes around. What it's actually doing to people, it is, making them aware of the museum and the brand of the museum, that then once they, see it again in a different context, they have different associations. But also going maybe to design schools and like the project I did with, have those user experience students, really do design work for your museum. That's a way for you to learn. That's also like a relatively easy way to experiment. and come up with fresh ideas, because that's what we all need. We need new people to come and say that, and then you're like, oh wow, yeah, do you know what, I've spent the whole year in this garage, thank you for pulling me out and seeing the world from a different perspective.
We have time for one last question or comment. Kaisa, I don't know if you would like to.
Yeah, I have one question. Innovation, we do need to be more innovative in museums, I think. And once we start developing new methods and experiment and find ways to work that will push us forward, what would you suggest are the best ways to manage and nurture innovation once we get it started?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the thing that comes to my mind is that when, like your first question, that the answer is to start small and then start growing. So the answer is to, how do you grow the new ways of working for the whole organization? And you start with the projects. So when you do innovation projects, whether they're big or small, or you have university students do it, the question is that, okay, how do I take everything that we learned, and how does it change our way of working? How does it change our leadership model? How does it change our decision-making model in the museum organization? And then you do the next experiment. So the way I'm proposing and seems to be working for many, many decades is that you do concrete projects and then let's see how they shape the organization. And in that way, you kind of gradually change the organization. Of course, you could be in a situation where many businesses are that the organization doesn't change, and the only solution is just to, blow everything apart, and the competition comes and changes. That's a creative destruction from Schumpeter from 1930s.
Well, since it's our final meetup, I thought I can start with thanking my colleagues in this journey, Kaisa Hartig and Lauren Vargas, who would not join us. I really enjoyed all the discussions and debate with you, Kaisa, and Lauren. She will be following the recording, so I'm thanking her here as well. Hopefully this will lead to something else. Who knows? There's always a seed to plant, and as Diane usually shares with us, you have to plant it in the right pot in order to grow. That's something I learned from her. I'd like to thank Diane and Maxime, my two other colleagues, with whom I enjoy working and sharing lots of ideas, discussions. Sometimes we do disagree a bit, but it's a pleasure to work with you as well. I've learned a lot from this series, and hopefully we will be moving on with other things, perhaps also beyond digital, but not just.